Okay, good morning. Today's daf is Nazir daf Yud Chet, and we left off with a real cliffhanger yesterday. So we had yesterday asked the following question. We asked, well, pull that back up and note what we noted. So we noted that if one becomes tameh in the middle of their nazirut, so then in addition to going through the traditional purification process, you got to become tahor again, and that involves the sprinkling of the para aduma ashes water on days 3 and 7, and then on day 7, after you've gotten sprinkled, you go to the mikvah and you do tevilah in the mikvah, and then there are two things that need to happen according to the Torah. This is written explicitly in the Torah that need to happen in order for the person to be through with their with the tumah. First, they're going to have to shave their head, and second, they're going to have to bring certain sacrifices on day 8. So the shaving of the head happens on day 7. The bringing of the sacrifices happen on day 8. And the three sacrifices there are two bird sacrifices. One's a chatas, one's an ola, one's a sin offering, and one is an offering that all goes to God. And then in addition, there's a third sacrifice, which is a sheep that is used as an asham. An asham is a special sacrifice that is also an atonement sacrifice. There are specific categories of sins that have an asham associated with it. And in addition, there's the general category of an asham of anytime you sin that you think you may have sinned, where you're obligated to bring a sin offering, a chatas, but you don't know for sure that in fact you did that sin. And so in that situation, you bring an asham as a preliminary offering. But that's not the type of asham we're talking about here. Here we're talking about an asham for a specific sin. This is for the specific sin of having become tameh while one is a nazir. And so if that in fact happens, so then in addition to the sin offering and the ola, one also brings the asham, the atonement offering. So now that we've gotten that, we had in our last Mishnah, okay, the fact that if one is in a cemetery and one becomes a nazir, they are not required to bring these sacrifices. And so Rav Ashi asks, okay, I get that you don't have to bring the sacrifices if you become tameh, if you're already tameh when you become a nazir. But what about the shaving of the head? That was another aspect of the requirements to for the tahara process, for the purification process. Again, in addition to all the things that you need to do to become pure according to the Torah, in an ordinary case for a non-nazir, there are two additional requirements for a nazir: bringing a variety of sacrifices, which we just said does not apply if one is already tameh when they become a nazir, and shaving one's head. And we don't know, and this is Rav Ashi's question, does that apply when one is already tameh? Do we say that because there's no korban, there's also no obligation to shave, meaning that those two things go together? Or are they completely separate issues? And we say that just as one who is tameh and becomes a nazir would get lashes, right? We say that we saw that was a discussion of yesterday and the day before, that one who is tameh, according to Rabbi Yochanan, gets lashes. And even though Reish Lakish disagreed, we ended up disproving Reish Lakish's position, and we found a baraisa that specifically says that if one is tameh and then becomes a nazir, they're going to get lashes, assuming that they are sufficiently warned. So too, maybe we could say that just as a tameh, a person who becomes a nazir gets lashes, maybe he also needs to shave his head. And we unsuccessfully attempted to answer this question 3 times yesterday. But the good news is that today, the 4th time is the charm. So let's pick up. We're at Tashma. We're at, which is the end of the 2nd line on Yud Chet Amud Aleph, and we can go through, and here is going to be the proof for our case. So Tashma, come hear this brisa. The Timei Rosh Nizro. The pasuk says, this is the pasuk in Bamidbar Perek Vav pasuk Tet, that it says, and he contaminated the head of his Nazirut. Meaning, the point is that we're talking about somebody who became contaminated. Now, this broader pasuk, just so that we have the entire pasuk, it says, V'chi yamut meit alav. This is the quote of the pasuk, Parak Vav pasuk Ted in Bamidbar. If a person were to die upon him, v'peta pitom, suddenly, v'timei rosh nizro, and cause his head, that is a Nazir, because the head is the focal point of Nazirut, because one allows his hair to grow, and he has therefore made his head tameh. The gilach rosho, he needs to shave his head biyom taharato, on the day he becomes tahor. So we can see this verse specifically requires that at the moment that one becomes tahor, one needs to shave one's head. By Yom HaShavi'i Yigal Chanu. And it's even clear, it's on the seventh day. So there's no debate about when one shaves one's head. It's on the seventh day of the Tahara process. That's the day that one gets sprinkled and goes to the mikvah. So that's what we're talking about. So what about that verse? Right? It's clear that the pasuk is talking about somebody who was a tahor nazir and then became tahor tamei. Shehu ta'un ha'avaras sayar v'habas tziporin. That's the person who's going to require the shaving of the hair and the offering of the birds. And Tosfos notes here, if we take a look, 1, 2, 3, fourth Tosfos on the page, the liftor es hanazir bekever. Well, let's read the next words because that's what they go on. The liftor as hanazir bekever, and that this is the situation where. So the implication is that this would exempt the person who's a nazir, who becomes a nazir when he's in the cemetery. That he would not need the bird off, the removing of the hair and the bird offerings. So Tosfos points out that in fact the bird offerings aren't the only offerings. What about the asham? So here he notes, because again, the two bird offerings, one is a bird offering that's fully burnt to God, and the second one is a sin offering. And we say, V'hu adin, the Tosfos says, again, fourth Tosfos down, V'hu adin d'mima'et le me'asham, that this would also come to exclude the asham offering. Diksiv ba'hu inyana, because that offering is written, indeed it's written in the next pasuk, or in two psukim later, in pasuk Yud Aleph. And so that is the story. V'hainu d'ka'amar b'masnisin b'nazir b'kever einu maybe korban tuma d'mi'ata kra k'dedarshin hacha. As we're about to learn, the point is that all the karbanot are excluded. So although we're just mentioning the birds in this brisa, the truth is that all the offerings are excluded. V'halo dvarim kal v'chomer. Now you might have thought, now although often the halo dvarim kal v'chomer, so this is sort of like a question, right? One might have thought that we would have a kal v'chomer that would say something different. That what would the kal v'chomer be? Uma tahor shenitma taon ha'avara seyar v'havas tziporin. That if you have somebody who was initially tahor and then became tameh, he's going to need to have the hair shaved and the offering of the birds, and the various karbanot. Misha hayatimi mitchila. If somebody even begins in a state of tuma, eno din ton havar seyar v'havas tziporin. Shouldn't it be, logical that the person should certainly be required to remove their hair and have the bird offerings? So Talmud Lomar b'timei rosh nizro. The pasuk comes to tell us by effectively repeating unnecessary words, because the pasuk could have said, right, V'chi yamut meit alav pes befeta pitom, Vigilach Rosho biyom tarato, that if somebody suddenly dies on him, it's implied that the person is going to be tamei. So we don't need to say v'timei rosh nizro, and we would just continue Vigilach Rosho biyom tarato biyom hashvi yigalchano, that he should shave his head on the seventh day. The Misha, so the fact that it repeats these words and says these words on some level unnecessarily, we know that B'misha haya tahor v'nitma hakasav medaber, that the pasuk is talking about somebody who was tahor and then became tamei. Sheyehei ton ha'avara seyar v'habas tziporin, that in that situation, or that only when a person is tahor and then becomes tamei, that's where the person needs to cut their hair and remove and have the offerings. The liftor as a nazir bekever, and it comes to exempt somebody who is a nazir, who becomes a nazir while in a cemetery. So Shema Mina. So we've seen that this baraisa very explicitly ties together the shaving and the korbanot. And so as a result, just as one is not obligated in the korbanot, as reflected in our Mishnah, so too one will not be obligated in the head shaving if one becomes a nazir from in a cemetery or otherwise is already tamei. Okay, so now that we've dealt with that, over the last 2 days, we've cited a particular brisa several times. Specifically, this is a brisa about the difference between a person who is tahor and becomes a nazir and then becomes tamei, or is tamei already and becomes a nazir. And we said that the only difference between those two situations is whether the seventh day counts as day number 1. That if you are already tamei, well then, since you don't have to bring the korbanot, on day 7, you can already begin your new count of nazirut. But according to, but if you are tahor when you are a nazir and then you become tamei, well, since you have to offer the offerings, it's not until the 8th day that you can begin your count. Now we are about to see that there is actually a machlokas about that. And we're going to get into that later today. But before we do that, we're going to try and figure out who the author of that brisa is. So Mantana Hadatana Rabbanan. Who is the brisa that was taught by the rabbis, the following brisa? Ein bein tamei shenazir lenazir tahor shenitma. There's no difference between somebody who's tamei who becomes a nazir and a nazir who's tahor who becomes tamei. Elisha tamei shenazir shvi shelo ololo min minyan. The only difference is the fact that on the 7th day, the question is, does that 7th day count towards the beginning of the nazirut? That for somebody who's already tamei, it will count.
And what day? Some day?
We're talking. It depends on which day they become tamei. Whatever day of the week that they become tamei, on the previous day, on the following week, that's when they will become tahor. So if they became tamei on Monday, well, then the next week on Sunday they will become tahor. So
Saturday to Friday is a week.
Yes, exactly. Saturday to Friday is 1 week. The nazir tahor shenit. Who thought of that? I think the Torah thought of that idea with the creation, that a creation took 7 days. So that was how we came up with the week. So the Nazir Torah shenitma ein shvi shelo ololo min minyan. That and whereas a Nazir Tahor who becomes tamei, for him the 7th day doesn't count from the number. So who is that? So Rav Chisda is going to give us the answer, and he says, Rama Rav Chisda Rebbe. It's actually Rebbe. It's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi to Amar Rebbe. Because what did Rebbe say? Ein nazirus tahara chala ella ad shmini. That when you have somebody who is tahor and then becomes becomes tamei, that they don't become they can't start counting again until day 8. Well, that's what we said. That's the difference that is noted in this brisa. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, because if you want to say that it's Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, Ha'amar Nazirus de Tahara Mishvihu dechayla. He actually says that even in the case of somebody who is tahor and becomes tamei, he says that you can actually begin your count on day 7. He says you don't have to wait for the korbanot the way our brisa said. So that brisa clearly can't be like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, but rather it's like Rebbe. So now that we said that, so where do we get this concept of my Rebbe? So the Gemara continues, my Rebbe, my Rebbe Yossi, Rebbe Yehuda. Where are you? What's the story with this statement? You quoted them and you've told me what they say, but you haven't given me the citation. Well, Tanya, because we have the following brisa. This is the brisa where it says it. So the Kiddush es Rosho b'yom hahu, that the person should sanctify. So this is pasuk yud aleph perek vav pasuk yud aleph in Bamidbar, that the person should sanctify his head on that day by yom hahu. So biyom havaz karbonosav divrei Rebbe, that according to Rebbe, what's the day that the person can once again begin the count of being a Nazir? It's the day on which he offers the sacrifices. So Rabbi Yossi, indeed, it's the day on which he could offer the sacrifices, even if he doesn't. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, b'yom tiglachto. That Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's not the 8th day when you offer the sacrifices. It's the 7th day, the day that the shaving happens, and that's the day that's referred to by Yom Hahu. Now, the interesting thing is that if we take a look at that pasuk, right? So the pasuk, Perek pasuk Yud Aleph says the following: V'asa hakohen echad lechatas ve'echad laola. So he takes the 2 birds. The Kohen takes the 2 birds. Makes one for a sin offering, one for an ola. V'chiper alav, and he thereby creates an atonement for the Nazir who has become tamei. Ma'asher chata al hanefesh, because he sinned by becoming tamei to a dead person. The kiddush es rosho, and then the Nazir sanctifies his head by Yom Hahu on that day. Now, literally understanding this pasuk, the pasuk is talking about the day on which the karbanot are brought. So Rebbe's position makes a lot more sense. So we're going to understand and explain how Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says that this actually refers back to psukim, to pasuk tet, namely the day on which he shaves. So how does that? So how do we figure that out? That we're going to see in a moment. V'haditnan. Well, 1 second. We have the following Mishnah. Nazir shenitma tumas harbe. If a Nazir becomes tamei on several different occasions, Einu mevi ela karban echad. He only has to bring one sacrifice. So Mantana, who is the Tana of this Mishnah? This Mishnah is from Karitut. It is Perek Bet plus Mishnah Gimel, and we want to know who is the person who says that one can somehow become tamei on several times and yet only have to bring one sacrifice. Now, here's the issue with that statement, because if in fact one were to go through the entire Tara process and have brought their sacrifices, well, then of course they're going to have to bring all new sacrifices. So that can't be the situation. And if they are already tamei and they're still tamei, and then they become tamei again, well, that's one long tuma. So that can't be the situation. So we need to figure out what's the situation that this Mishnah is talking about. So Amar Rav Chisda again comes to our rescue and answers the question, and he says, this time it's not Rebbe, but Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yehuda. It's the other opinion. It's Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Nazirus Tahara Mishvi Chayla, because he's the one who says that actually the count begins again on day 7. And so as a result, so if you have somebody who has the following happen to them, they become tamei, all right? And so they're a tahor nazir, then they become tamei. So they're going to go through a 7-day process, and on day 8, they're going to have to offer sacrifices. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, on day 7, they can begin the count again for their nazirut. And unfortunately, they happen to walk into a building where somebody had just dropped dead or drops dead when they walk in. And so as a result, they become tamei again, but it's day 7. They haven't had even a chance to offer the offering. And so as a result, in that situation, Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, says that even though it's a new tum'ah, we're going to say that the person only has to offer one offering. Now, for Rebbe, of course, one only has to offer one offering. One hasn't even made it through the system yet, so there's no second offering because it's only one long tuma, right? And so we're going to see that in a moment. So Kavan, all right. Okay. And now we skip the parentheses. Kavan de lo yatsa shah haru'uya lahavi korban. Since the person did not reach a time where he was able to offer a korban, einu chayav ela korban echad. He only has to bring one korban. De'item Rebbe, because if you want to say that it's Rebbe, if you're going to say that he became tameh on the seventh day and then again became tameh on the seventh day several times, kulu tuma arichdahi. It's all one long tuma. The person hasn't yet become tahor enough to restart their counting of the Nazirut. V'ida nitma b'shmini. But on the other hand, if the person became tummy on the eighth day, v'chazar v'nitma b'shmini, and then became tummy again on the eighth day, as we said, the person already had the chance to offer the offerings, and so he's going to have to offer multiple offerings. He's reached a time in which he's able to bring a korban, and so as a result, he's going to have to bring a korban. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, what if he becomes tummy at night on the eighth day? Because you can't bring a korban at night. You are thinking along the right lines, and we will get to that question in a moment. So my time of the Rebbe. So what's the reasoning of Rebbe? So now we're going to give the reasoning of Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. So what's the reasoning of Rebbe? So let's see. So Amar Kra v'chiper alav me'asher chata al hanefesh. So we have the pasuk that says, right, specifically that the person is going to, that this is the pasuk parak vav pasuk yudal, that the person is going to atone from, have the atonement, and then v'hadar v'kiddush es rosho, and only then does the pasuk say, and then he's going to sanctify his head, meaning that we're going to restart the count. So as we noted, parak vav pasuk yudal of Bamidbar seems very simply to be understanding that you have to offer the sacrifices, or at least be able to offer the sacrifices, which is what Rebbe is saying, in order for you to be able to restart the count. Well, what about Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda? What does he say? Im kain lema krav v'kideshes rasho. Well, then the pasuk should, all it needs to say is the kideshes rosho. But the pasuk has two additional words at the end of the pasuk. It says bayomahu. We don't need those words. Those words aren't necessary. So as we turn to Yudchet Amud Bet, we ask the question, Bayomahu Lamali, why did the pasuk add those two words? Im eno inyan lashmini. So as a result, the fact is that when we say that day, it's got to be referring to a different day, because we didn't need to say that day. So that day must go back on the pasuk previous to this, where it says Im eno inyan lishmini teneo inyan lishvi. Say that it refers to the previous psukim where it's talking about tiglachas, the shaving, and that is happening on the seventh day. Oh, but what about Rebbe? Rebbe nami hachsiv bayomahu. Why does he think that those words are extra? What does those words come to teach him? Amrullah Rebbe would tell you, hahu lahachi hu da'asa. It's coming to tell us this. Lomar lach afal pisha lo hevi karbonosav. That on that day he is going to start the count, even if he doesn't bring any of the carbonot. As soon as the day begins, he gets to restart the count, and that's Rebbe's position. So we've now seen two positions. We've seen Rebbe's position and Rabbi Yehuda. And we've seen the position of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. So so first, Rav Chisda is going to focus on the psukim, and let's take a look and see what happened. So the Rav Chisda. So now Rav Chisda explained our Mishnah according to Rabbi Yossi in Krisus, according to Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. So my duchakela ukme Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Lukma kagon did nitma v'techazia b'leil shmini. Why didn't he say that as I mentioned just a moment ago, why didn't he say that let it talk about the eighth day at night? Meaning that's a time where the person couldn't offer the korban, and it seems like Rebbe says that the person can already begin to count as a tahor and as other day for the Nazir. The Rebbe, let's say that it's actually Rebbe. So, and midelo mukim lo karebi. So, can we say that because he didn't say it like Rebbe, lema kasavar leili lav mechusar zmanhu? So, this is a concept. Mechusar zman is a concept that says that you still need to wait some amount of time in order for something to happen. And so here, according to Rebbe, it must be that the nighttime is mechusar zman, meaning that you can't, because you can't offer the korban at night, it means that it must be that in the next morning is only then is when the person is allowed to start counting for his Nazirut. So Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava Haba Hatalia. No, you can't necessarily say that because the two concepts may actually be tied together. So Amra Lele Mechusar Zman, if you want to say, because you could say two different views of Rebbe. You can't say which one he holds. You can either say that nighttime is Mechusar Zman, and Amos Machzeh leKarban Elatzafra, and when are you able to offer the korban in the morning? So the answer is the morning. Nazirus nami lo chayla atzafra. So too, you won't start counting day one of the Nazirut until the morning. The amrat lele eno mechusar zman. And if you say that no, we don't treat the night, even though you can't offer korbanot at night, we're going to treat the night as if it's already a time where you could offer the korbanot. And so as a result, Nazirus tahara chayla ma'orsa, in which case the Nazirus at night will also apply at night. So the Nazirus will also apply at night. So whatever you're going to say about Rebbe, the time of the person counting their Nazirut will be equal to the time in which we're going to view them as capable of offering the korban, even for a technical reason, because it's nighttime, they're not able to offer it. And so as a result, there is no way that one could be obligated to offer only one set of korbanot and be tameh multiple times. So there's just no way. So as a result, that is why the Mishnah, that is why Rav Chisda answers that Mishnah in Kritut has to be according to Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now that we're at the two dots, so now we're going to analyze, and it turns out we've seen two opinions regarding when one starts the count of Nazirut after one becomes Tameh, and now namely, Rebbe says we begin on day 8, either at the morning or at the evening, depending on what he says about whether the night is Mechusar Zman. And Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, says no, we begin on day 7 once the guy has shaved. So we have these two opinions, and it turns out that there are some additional opinions. Now, the first of the 3 additional opinions that we're going to offer is one that we have already seen. It is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. But then we will offer 2 additional opinions. So let's take a look. So Gufa, Nitma B'Shvi, we're now going to quote a long brisa. Nitma B'Shvi v'chazer v'nitma B'Shvi. If somebody became tummy on the 7th day and then became tummy again on the 7th day, Enu maybe ela karban echad. He only brings one sacrifice. This was precisely the view of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, in the Mishnah in Krisos. Nitma b'shmini v'chazer v'nitma b'shmini. On the other hand, if he becomes tummy on the 8th day and he becomes tummy again on the 8th day, maybe karban gal kol echad ve'echad. He's going to have to bring one sacrifice for each incident. Now, everybody seems that Rebbe even would agree with that, but this is according matchel umona miyad. But when it comes to the counting, he begins immediately, namely on the 7th day. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says. And of course, again, this Rabbi Eliezer statement is exactly like Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachamim say, Karban echad al hakol. You have to bring one sacrifice for every aspect of Tuma. So until one brings the sin offering. So the point is that until one brings the sin offering, of the one of the 2 birds is again a sin offering. So until one does that, it's all one long tuma. On the other hand, once he brings a sin offering, so then every time he becomes tameh, he's going to have to offer another offering. Maybe korban al kol echad ve'echad. He's going to have to bring a korban for each one. Hevi chataso below hevi ashamo mona. And even that, and once he brought the sin offering, even if he hasn't yet brought his asham offering, he can already begin to count his nazirut. Rabbi Yishmael. So that's opinion number 2. Opinion number 2 says, and this is the rabbis, they say you don't begin on day 8 until you have brought your sin offering. Rabbi Yishmael ben Oshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, says, Omer Kishem Shuchata, so ikvato, just like his sin offering prevents him from becoming tahor and counting the days, Kain Ashamo Ma'akvo, so to the Asham offering prevents him. So Bishlam Rabbi Eliezer. So we understand Rabbi Eliezer because, of course, Rabbi Eliezer is exactly like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. So Amar Krav Kiddushes Rosho B'Yom Hahu. We learn from the fact that it says B'Yom Hahu. B'Yom Hahu is unnecessary, so we apply it back to the previous psukim, and so that's why Af Al Pisha Lo Hevi Karbanosab. Even though he hasn't brought his karbanot, he's already going to become tahor, and as a result, he could become tameh again and only offer one offering. V'Rabbanan, and the rabbis also, it makes sense because hahu afa pisha lo hevi ashamo. The point is that we said earlier that according to Rebbe, hahu teaches us even though one didn't offer any offerings. So here the rabbis are going to say that hahu tells us that even though you didn't offer the asham offering. Ella Rebbe Yishmael, hahu lamali. What's the purpose of the word hahu? What's bayom hahu? Why do you need to say that? It's extra words that the Torah doesn't seem to say is needed because, again, Rabbi Yishmael says that you have to effectively have offered all of the karbanot. So Amar Lach Rabbi Yishmael would tell you, hahu af al pi shelo hevi olato. No, you don't have to actually have offered all the karbanot. You just have to offer the chatas and the asham. But even though you didn't offer the ola, that's okay. So for Rabbanan, ola lo. So now the rabbis, now we're going to go backwards in the other direction. So why don't the rabbis say that hahu just tells us about the ola? Well, they're not going to say that because ola lo by mi'uta. The ola doesn't need any kind of special exclusion. Doron ba'almahu. It's just a very nice gift that is being offered. So we don't need to say anything about it that's special. And Tosos addresses the question, well, why doesn't Rabbi Yishmael say like the rabbis? And he would say, the point is that this pasuk is talking about karbanot. And you've already offered some of the karbanot. So that's why because the sin offering and the ola offering are all in one pasuk, so that's why you would need an exclusion for it. So that's Tosos answering the question of why Rabbi Yishmael doesn't hold like the Rabbanan. So my time of the Rabbanan. So what's the reasoning of the rabbis? Meaning, why don't they say Bayomahu goes back and says all of the karbanot? The Tanya, the Hizir La Hashem Es Yemei Nizro Behavi Keves Ben Shnaso La Hashem. We have a brisa that teaches the following, and the pasuk is the pasuk this is pasuk Yud Bet, but Midbar Vav pasuk Yud Bet. So it's the next pasuk, and the pasuk says that the Hizir La Hashem Es Yemei Nizro, the person is going to dedicate to Hashem the days of his Nazirut. Behavi Kevis ben Shnato la Asham, and he's going to bring his Asham offering. V'hayamim harishonim yipulu ki tamei nizro, and the first days are going to fall away because he became tamei. So, what do we see in this pasuk? Ma Talmud lomar lefishim matzinu shekol ashamot shebetorah shehein ma'akvin. I would think that in all of the Torah, anytime you have to bring an Asham offering, that Asham offering is a necessary precondition to your finishing your atonement process. So Yachol Af Zema Akvo. I would have thought that this time it would also be critical. So Talmud Lomar v'Hizir v'Hevi. So that's why the Torah comes and tells us v'Hizir v'Hevi, that one needs to first begin their count, and then they can bring the karban asham. So the ordering in this pasuk is specific. The ordering is you restart your count before you dedicate. Afal pisha lo hevi hizir. Even though you didn't yet bring the asham, you should already begin your new count. and Rabbi Yishmael ben Oshel, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer. So what about Rabbi Yishmael? Rabbi Yishmael was the one who said that not only do you have to have brought your sin offering, but you also have to have brought your asham offering. Why doesn't he learn this drasha? V'hezir v'hevi. No, you're misreading the pasuk. The pasuk has a vav that connects the two, and so as a result, v'hizir la'Hashem es Yemei Nizro, you're going to need to start your count. V'hevi keves ben shnaso, and you need to bring, and so the two are connected. Emasai hizir bisman shehevi. When do you begin the new count? Only when you have brought the karban. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, 1 second, the whole question here was how do the rabbis use the pasuk of Bayomahu? We didn't use the pasuk of Bayomahu. We just used the pasuk of the Hizir V'Hevi. So Tosfos explains that question. So if we look at the top Tosfos on Yutet Amud Aleph, Perish. So Talmud Lomer v'Hizir v'Hevi Ashamo, Afal Pisha Lo Hevi Ashamo v'Hizir. So again, the rabbis say that even though the person has not yet brought their asham, they're going to have to be. They can begin their count. Perish Chayil Aleha Nizirut Tahara, that the new Nizirut of being Tahor will apply to the person, even though they have not yet brought their asham offering. Debahachi Mishtai Kra, that is the implication of the pasuk. V'im tomar im kain l'rabanan hahu lamali. Well, 1 second. What about the whole pasuk of hahu? So typically, mivihizir beresha. Why did the hadar behavi? Why didn't we say in the first place that the pasuk that is relevant is v'hizir behavi? Why did we refer back to the previous pasuk of bayomahu? So v'yesh lomar ilav hahu. If not for the words hahu and the word bayomahu, that on that day, hava darshinan v'hizir l'rabot, I would have said exactly what Rabbi Yishmael said, that we come to include the fact that you need to bring the include the bringing of the asham. Afal pisha lo hevi olato, and that you would say just like Rabbi Yishmael that it's coming to that in the end all we're learning is that you didn't have to bring the ola olam asham ma'akev, and really the asham would be required. So basically without bayom hahu, the rabbis would say that you would need to bring both the asham and both the chatas and the asham, and so kasav rachmana hahu. So the pasuk, the Torah then writes the word hahu, and that reveals the Islan lemidrash that one can actually use the drasha of the hizir afal pisha lo hevi, that we can actually say that when it says hizir and then says hevi, it really means even though you did it. And so as a result, you actually need to have both. So where do we come out? We have Rabbi Yishmael who says the following: because of the tying together of the ola and the chatas, I might have thought that even the ola is required, and therefore Bayomahu tells us, you know what, you don't need to have brought the ola. But the Hizir V'Hevi tells us you do need the asham. The rabbis say, no, the ola is always a gift to God. That's not going to be required, even though you've tied the two together, even though they're referred to as two birds together. So even though they're two birds together, you were not going to say Bayomahu tells us about the ola. So as a result, the Bayomahu tells us that actually you don't need to bring the asham. And it allows us to use the drasha of the fact that the hizir of the beginning of the count in Pasuk Yud Bet comes before the hevi. And so as a result, you're allowed to start the count even without having brought the asham. So according to the rabbis, you don't have to have brought either the ola or the asham. And then you have Rebbe, who says actually Bayomahu tells us that you don't have to have brought any of the karbanot, that all you have to have done is had the day itself come. And then the fourth opinion is to say no, Bayomahu doesn't have anything to do with the pasuk in which it finds itself, and therefore doesn't have to do with any karbanot, because you wouldn't need Bayomahu if you're talking about karbanot, because that is the nature of that pasuk. And so as a result, we have Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, who says that Bayomahu tells us no. Bayomahu is referring to yesterday, day number 7. And so those are the 4 different opinions that we have in our Gemara. And so now the Gemara is going to wonder which of them align with the brisa that we have not learned and had not quoted yet. And so for that brisa, and to see who actually is the opinion associated with that brisa, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom.
Is James is coming tonight?
James should be there tonight.
It has to be.
I know, it's going to
Talk,
be
Rabbi.
wonderful dinner.
Because
Shabbat shalom.
The week.